We read today from the Gospel of Mark, the 8th chapter, verses 31 through 38. Then Jesus began to teach them that the Son of Man must undergo great suffering and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the scribes, and be killed, and after 3 days rise again. He said all this quite openly. And Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. But turning and looking at his disciples, he rebuked Peter and said, "Get behind me, Satan, for you are setting your mind not on divine things, but on human things." He called the crowd with his disciples and said to them, "If any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake and for the sake of the gospel will save it. For what will it profit them to gain the whole world and forfeit their life? Indeed, what can they give in return for their life? Those who are ashamed of me and of my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, of them the Son of Man will also be ashamed when he comes in the glory of his Father with the holy angels." This is the turning point. Read any biblical commentary, take any class in New Testament, and you will learn that. This moment in the Gospel of Mark is the turning point. It is the time when the story of Jesus turns away from his ministry of healing and teaching and toward his arrest and torment and death. Up until now, the disciples have witnessed Jesus' power and authority. In today's text, Jesus warns them that from now on, they will witness his suffering. He began to teach them that the Son of Man must undergo great suffering and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the scribes, and be killed, and after 3 days, rise again. How would you feel if you heard that from someone you deeply loved and admired, someone you had committed yourself to following? You would be so upset that you'd probably forget all decorum, forget even who was the teacher and who the pupil, and you'd take that person aside and you'd give him a good talking to. Or even, as Peter did, rebuke him. Distinct from Matthew, which also has a version of this story, in Mark, we don't hear what Peter said to Jesus, and so we are free to imagine it. How he rebuked Jesus, and what were the human things that Peter had on his mind, and how did he reveal them to Jesus? Did he express concern about Jesus' reputation? Concern for reputation is certainly a human thing. And power. That's something humans are concerned about too. Remember, the Jews have been expecting a Messiah who will be a victorious king, exercising power over those who have oppressed them for generations. Just before today's text, Peter has named Jesus as that Messiah. And now Jesus has described a coming time when he will be rejected, humiliated, tortured, killed. That is not a human idea of what it means to be powerful. And how about that bit about rising again? Is that why Peter rebuked Jesus? Come on, Jesus. That's crazy talk. What'll people think? Oh, how fixed is the human mind on what people will think. Or maybe Peter said something like this: Jesus, we have got a great life here. As your disciples, we have found the most amazing community. Together in everything we do, eating, walking, talking, resting, praying. Look how much meaning you have brought to all of us by inviting us into this perfect community. It is your legacy. Are you going to risk losing it? Why? Do you want things to change? It is very human, not to want things to change. As if to acknowledge how much Peter's words reflect the common concerns of human beings, Jesus at this point turns to address a larger audience, not only the disciples, but the whole crowd of people around them. If any want to become my followers, he says, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake and for the sake of the gospel will save it. We tried imagining what Peter said, but now we can also infer some things from how Jesus responded. Let those who want to follow me deny themselves. So the implication is that whatever Peter said, it revealed a focus on his own desires. But surely Peter was just looking out for Jesus, right? Jesus' reputation, Jesus' power, Jesus' safety, Jesus' community. Is that self-focused, trying to protect your loved ones from harm, hoping they will not suffer humiliation or pain, insisting that they not put themselves in harm's way, urging them not to risk loss? Are not these efforts and hopes and insistences and urgings only human? If these are the human things that Peter sets his mind on, well, they sure don't seem like the worst things about Peter. Indeed, isn't caring about our loved ones the thing that marks us as human? When Jesus says, deny yourselves, does Jesus mean his followers should deny their humanity? You know, I'm fascinated by the fact that the verb that Jesus uses when he says, deny yourselves, is the same one he will use later to say to Peter, you will deny me 3 times. And only in connection with these 2 stories does that verb appear in the New Testament. And Peter will indeed deny Jesus. He will pretend he doesn't know Jesus, never even met the man. When Jesus says, deny yourselves, does he want us to pretend we don't know who we are? I doubt it. More likely, that seems like the opposite of what Jesus wants. I just think that won't do at all. It will not do to deny that ourselves are mortal. Such denial could lead to a very inflated sense of our own importance. As it says in the Catholic liturgy for Ash Wednesday, drawing on Ecclesiastes, remember, O mortal, that you are dust, and to dust you shall return. You and every other living creature on the planet. Of course, that's scary. Knowing that our lives and the lives of everyone we love will come to an end is scary. And it will not do to deny that ourselves are scared. To pretend that we don't know, that we never even met those scared creatures in the mirror is probably as unhelpful as pretending that we never met Jesus. We are scared, mortal creatures, and we had better know that about ourselves, and I don't think Jesus wants us to deny it. Because knowing what we are helps us to understand our behavior. Scared mortal creatures are graspers. We are clingers. We cling to what we like, what we love, what we know, what makes us feel safe. We hope that if we cling hard enough, we will save the lives of those around us and, of course, our own. Peter loved Jesus. Peter cared about Jesus, and Peter clung to the Jesus that he thought he could protect and even possess. He clung to Jesus' reputation, which could burnish his own. He clung to Jesus' power, which could make him a victor too. He clung to Jesus' friendship. Who among us would not cling to such a friend? He clung to Jesus' community because living in that community was so meaningful and so blessed and so exciting. The relationships, the fellowship. It must have felt like the best life he would ever lead. No wonder he was so afraid that something might change. that he might lose it all. Loss of reputation, loss of power, loss of a friend, loss of community. Maybe the human things on which Peter was setting his mind were loss, 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 and loss. No wonder he was scared. Aren't we all? A couple of weeks ago, I saw a wonderful documentary called The Biggest Little Farm. It's the story of a young couple creating an organic farm on burned-out, used-up land in California. Beautiful film, full of gorgeous photography and just saturated with joy. I've been telling everybody to watch this film, but I have to give you a trigger warning. This film includes information about mortality, because you cannot talk about farm life without acknowledging mortality. The film begins in hope, traipses through months of hard work, and surges into excitement as the barren acreage greens and blossoms, trees burst with fruit, herds of animals swarm the hillsides. We see birds, bees, ducks, chickens, sheep, cows. We grow attached to Emma the pig and a very cantankerous rooster named Mr. Greasy. The farm is perfect. We want to stay there forever. And then the filmmaker skillfully introduces the challenges, the pests, the predators, the illnesses, the wildfires. And at last, as we grieve with the farm's owners over a heartbreaking loss, we get the lesson. As one of the owners says, the farm is energized entirely by the impermanence of life. Now, we know this intellectually, of course. Out of death and decay comes new life. We see it every year in the cycle of the seasons. But have you ever thought about it in just this way? Energized entirely by the impermanence of life. Loss is change, and change is the engine that drives life forward. Change is the sustainable energy fueling our mortal lives, strengthening us to bear them, allowing for rebirth. What farmers know is that we cannot possess life, not anyone else's and not even our own. Watching The Biggest Little Farm, you will want to reach right into your TV screen and cling to that perfect paradise. But clinging to paradise will not save it or you. Trying to possess it will not keep it from changing. Trying to possess Jesus rather than follow him was not going to save Peter's life either. And when Jesus tells Peter that, of course, he is not just talking to Peter. Remember how he turned to address not only the disciples, but the larger crowd, all those scared mortal creatures whose loves and hopes make them human. You and I share those loves and hopes and those fears, and we are in that crowd too. Clinging to what feels perfect in your life will not save your life. It will only keep you from letting yourself be changed. Jesus says those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake and for the sake of the gospel will save it. You can choose to risk nothing, change nothing, clinging to what makes you feel safe. Or you can choose to let yourself be changed for the sake of Jesus Christ, which will provide sustainable energy for what is to come. Jesus' call for self-denial is not a call to self-hatred. Jesus' call to deny yourselves doesn't mean pretending never to have met the most tender, scared parts of our mortal selves. But Jesus asks us to examine how we cling to whatever we think will save those mortal selves, what we like, what makes us feel safe, what we think we know, even what and who we love. We are not called to reject our loves or pretend they don't matter to us. But aren't we called to loosen our grip, to learn how trying to possess life or love or even an idea of who Jesus is keeps us from taking the hand of Christ, who guides us to the way things can be? Lamar Williamson describes Jesus' call as the denial of the grasping self to liberate the greater one. Peter was afraid. Of course he was. To think of losing Jesus was terrifying. And to lose Jesus in suffering, rejection, humiliation, that would mean losing his very idea of who Jesus was. Williamson says that Peter is tempted, and so are we, to think that God's anointed can avoid suffering, rejection, and death. That God's rule means power without pain, glory without humiliation. To lose this idea of who Jesus is, for Peter, that might be the greatest loss of all. Or it might create energy to sustain new ideas of Jesus, to sustain even a whole new way of life with Jesus, to sustain Peter even in bearing his own heavy cross of mortality, weighted with all the hopes and fears and loves that mark him as human. Letting the very idea of Jesus be changed for the sake of Jesus can provide sustainable energy for all that is to come, the greater sorrow and the greater self, the greater loss and the greater love, all for the greater glory of Jesus Christ, now and forever. Amen.